Hello everyone! Here is another game from the Speed Chess Championship finals between Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura, and here you will see something, a theme that was occurring pretty much in every other game throughout the entire event. Nakamura either got a better position or a winning position, but it simply wasn't enough. He couldn't convert into a win, and Magnus Carlsen just kept playing the best moves, and Nakamura didn't find the best solutions. So here is a game, and it's a very interesting game. It's King's Indian defense, but where white actually attacks on the king's side. So something you don't see very often, especially when Nakamura plays the King's Indian defense. So we have d4 by Carlsen. Carlsen has the white pieces in this game. Knight to f6, c4, g6, the King's Indian defense. Knight to c3, bishop to g7, e4 now, d6, knight to f3, Nakamura castles. We have h3, e5, d5 and a5 by Nakamura. Bishop to e3, we have knight to a6 and g4. So already you can see that Carlsen is ready to push on the king side. He will probably castle queen side. Knight to d7, preparing knight c5. We have knight to d2, knight d to c5 now, and rook to g1. King to h8, a3 now, bishop to d7 and queen to c2. c6, Carlsen castles queenside, c captures on d5, c captures on d5, and rook to c8, as the king and queen are together on the c file. So king to b1 by Carlsen, a4 now, preparing knight to come to b3 if that knight on d2 ever moves, and h4 by Carlsen. And here, as you can see, Carlsen is ready to push h5 or maybe g5 and only then h5, and definitely some lines will be open. Bishop is coming either to e2 or d3, the rooks will probably come to h1 and g1, and here a principled move by Nakamura would probably be something like queen to a5 and start pushing his own pawns on the queen side. But here Nakamura actually went for for f5, and this doesn't seem Carlsen is attacking on the king side. Your king is on the king side. You don't really want to open up too much on the king side, as Carlsen castled queen side. But it's not without any poison. If e captures on f5 and g captures on f5, you can't really capture, as your king and queen are on this nice diagonal, so this would lose material for Carlsen. For example, knight d2 e4, simply capture it. This knight is pinned from the rook on c8. But after this f5 move, Carlsen ignores this and pushes h5. We have f4, bishop captures on c5, knight captures on c5, and now h captures on g6. H captures on g6 and g5 now, for more control over the dark squares, and this pawn will pretty much stop this bishop and queen from interfering with Carlsen's plans on the king side. Rook to f7. We have bishop to b5 now. Carlsen wants to exchange this light squared bishop. King back to g8, not allowing any rook to h1 checks with tempo. Bishop captures, queen captures, and knight to c4. Now both of Carlsen's knights are coming for this d6 pawn. Queen to d8, we have knight to b5 now, and bishop to f8 now, protecting that pawn on d6. Rook to h1, we have queen to d7, knight back to c3, rook to c7, and knight to b6, now again with a tempo on the queen. Queen e8, we have f3, now adding more protection to d4 pawn, also preparing ideas like queen to h2 check. And it's a very interesting position here. Nakamura knows that Carlsen wants to go for queen h2 check. He plays knight to b3. We have knight captures on a4, Carlsen grabs that pawn, and Nakamura develops a devious plan how to stop queen to h2. He plays knight to d4, attacking the queen, and here Carlsen probably should have gone for something like queen to d3, but Carlsen plays queen to h2, and this is actually a blunder. Nakamura plays rook to h7, attacking the queen, and now Carlsen retreats queen to f2, but now this is why queen to h2 was impossible. Now Nakamura plays b5, and Magnus Carlsen loses a piece. As you can see, this knight doesn't really have anywhere to go. The b5 pawn is protected by the d4 knight. Carlsen does play knight to b6, not immediately, sorry. First he played rook captures on h7, he exchanges one rook, rook captures, and now knight to b6. But here is the problem, queen to d8 and the knight is trapped, the knight has nowhere to go. So here Carlsen played knight captures on b5, grabbing another pawn, knight captures on b5, and now knight back to c4. Knight to d4, we have queen to g2, rook to c7, rook to c1, defending the knight, queen to c8 with a double attack on the knight, and here queen to f1, Carlsen defends the knight, and Nakamura plays knight to b3. Here it's hard to say if Nakamura missed, as it's fairly simple, knight captures on f3. After queen captures, simply rook captures on f4. You still have an extra piece, but I don't actually think Nakamura missed this. I think that this extra piece he has on f8 isn't really doing that much. It is a winning position for black, but how do you stop the two passed pawns with this bishop that can't really go anywhere? You can't go through this pawn as it's blocked, and here your own pawn is blocked by the g5 pawn Carlsen pushed. So Nakamura is up a piece, but it's not a very good piece for now. So after this queen to f1, I don't think Nakamura missed knight captures on f3. I think he just didn't want to play against these two passed pawns. So knight to b3, rook to c3, and now knight to d4. King to a2, queen to a6, we have queen to d3, queen to a7 now, knight to d2, bishop to e7, trying now to get the bishop into the game, as the bishop will capture the g5 pawn. Rook captures on c7, queen captures on c7, and now knight to b3. And here again, Nakamura can go for simplifications with knight captures, queen captures, and bishop captures on g5. It's a completely winning position for black, but again he decides not to. Probably still because he doesn't want to face those two passed pawns Carlsen has. Queen to c2 now. He wants to exchange queens this way. Carlsen, of course, does this. Queen captures, knight captures, and knight to a5. And bishop captures on g5. Here Nakamura grabs a pawn. This still is a winning position for black, but a better idea would be to play knight to e1 and go for this f3 pawn. After you grab that pawn, you have this passed f4 pawn, and the passed f4 pawn is a lot closer than the passed g pawn. I mean, even if you capture on g5, you still have to push this pawn after you exchange. Again, you're probably going to go for promoting the f pawn. So maybe knight e1 capturing on f3 was better. But okay, after knight a5, Nakamura plays bishop captures on g5 and knight to c6 now. King to f7 and a4. Now Carlsen starts pushing his passed pawns on the queen side. Bishop to h4 and now a5. Bishop to f2, b4, king to e8. Now king is coming to help out with the defense. b5 now, king d7, b6. We have king to c8 and now king to b3. And knight to d4 check. Carlsen simply plays king to c4. You never want to exchange this. If you play knight captures, then you get 3 passed pawns, and here white is simply winning. You can't stop 3 passed pawns. So after king c4, we have king to b7. King to b7. Knight d8 check by Carlsen. King to a6, and now b7. You can't capture the a5 pawn because b8 becomes a queen, so king has to go to a7, and now a6. Again, you're protecting the a6 pawn by the threat of this pawn being promoted. And here, if Nakamura went for bishop to h4, this bishop to h4 is actually the winning move for black. You attack the knight here, and after the knight moves, simply play knight captures on f3, and it's a much better position, as white simply can't push his pawns. This knight will be unable to help out. As you can see, this bishop is covering all of the squares that are important pretty well. So the bishop can come help out either through e1 or through d8 if the knight moves. But after a6, g5 was played, and now Carlsen plays knight to f7, going after the d6 pawn. And so here it's pretty much a draw. Okay, Nakamura did block his bishop by playing this g5 move, but still after bishop to e1 and knight captures on d6, after bishop comes to a5, it's still a draw. As you can see, the bishop and knight are preventing the white king from entering the position. And this bishop will be covering any important squares this knight might use to check the black king. But after this knight to f7 move, Nakamura played bishop to h4, probably threatening g4 in the next move, but there simply isn't time for this. After this bishop to h4 move, Carlsen is simply winning, and he knows this. He plays knight captures on d6. We have g4 now, But now comes knight to c8 check. King to b8 and now knight to b6, and it is in this position that Hikaru Nakamura resigned the game. Now you can see that instead of being here, this bishop should have been on a5, and from there is no knight b6 idea. Unfortunately, now that the knight is on b6, it doesn't really matter what black plays. If he pushes, captures on f3, doesn't matter. Carlsen has this nice knight to d7 check. This comes with a check on a light square. King has to move, and now the knight is protecting the queening square. Queen to b8 check, and it doesn't matter. You can either push the a pawn to victory, it doesn't matter. You can even allow black to bring up a queen after queen a7. This is checkmate. This is a perfectly winning position for white. So yeah, after this knight to b6 move, Nakamura resigned the game, and once again we see that it simply isn't enough to have a winning position. Like so many players say, I was winning in that position, but my opponent won. Yes, your opponent won because he's a better player. That's the unfortunate truth for all of us. It's never enough to have a better position. You have to win the game, either from a better position, either from a worse position. Doesn't matter. Great game to learn from, and the funniest thing is this is actually a bullet game, but it's played so well. I mean, by Magnus Carlsen and Nakamura as well. He won a piece, but that piece simply wasn't enough. That extra piece was actually a semi-trapped bishop on f8. Okay, he could have untrapped it by playing something like this and capturing that g5 pawn, but there simply wasn't time for this. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I think this is the last game I'll be covering from this championship, unless you really want to suggest one more, then I will check it out. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon.